And welcome to Around the Ozark Spotlight. Each week, we uncover the stories behind the people who live and work here in Southwest Missouri. Those individuals with entrepreneurial spirit who work to better the lives of others or even put pen to paper to write books about the stories and history of the Ozarks and its people. I'm your host, Scott Meier. Today, we're going to explore one of my favorite worlds, the world of community theater. We've got director Mark Gideon here. Mark is the director for the production of Exit Laughing. Hello, Mark Gideon. How are you?
Hello, how are you? It's great to be here.
Excellent. Now, who is Mark Gideon? Why don't you take us back? Where are you from? Did you grow up in this area?
I did. I grew up and went to school out at Willard, Missouri. We had a 40-acre farm just east of Willard. It went to my
Okay.
all 12 grades, and I was very proud that I finished in just 12 years like everybody else. And then
Good
I
for
got
you.
my college degree at that time, it was Evangel College here in Springfield, and
All
then
right.
went on to get my master's at Pittsburgh State. But I'm actually now wonderfully a retired high school speech and drama teacher. I did most of my teaching right here in the Springfield public school system. And in fact, my last 9 years were at Hillcrest High School, where I was the speech and drama teacher. And in fact, I came full circle because I student taught at Hillcrest in the fall of 1978 and then
Okay.
retired there in 2020.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your service as a teacher. Not easy to do. One of my favorite teachers in my high school years was my drama coach, and
Mm-hmm.
we had a great group. And I'll tell you, even though I participated in sports, I don't think anything was more difficult to prepare for than getting up on stage.
It is a challenge. It is a challenge.
Well, as I mentioned to others before, one of the biggest challenges for me, anyway, for my brief acting career,
Mm-hmm.
was that you put in all the effort. It's the time that you put on the show, whether it's a show that
Mm-hmm.
goes for a week or a show that goes for a couple of times for a competition, and then it's done. And
Right.
I think that's the hardest part is when it's done
Mm-hmm.
because you feel like
Yes.
you wish it could go on forever.
Right. Well, you build such a community, and actually, you really become a family when you start the audition process and then begin rehearsals, and then it's opening night, and you go through all the performances, and then in just a blink of an eye, we're taking down the set, and it's just a memory. And that's why it is so important, especially at Springfield Little Theatre, that we tell all of our volunteers who are involved in these productions relish every moment. This is not going to be a
Yeah.
9 month run where we're going to be running this forever. We're going to be here for really in the whole scope of things. In the blink of an eye, we'll be on stage and doing the performances. And that's one of the hallmarks of Springfield Little Theater is that people come here as auditionees and leave as
Mhm.
family members.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Mark Gideon is the director of Exit Laughing, which is about to begin its run at Springfield
Yes.
Little Theater. And Mark, did you draw the short straw, or is this something you raised your hand and said, "This is a show I want to direct"?
Well, actually, I had just gotten cast in A Christmas Carol as
Hmm.
Scrooge, and Beth and I did an interview about the 90th season anniversary. And then she took me to lunch, and I knew something was up. So she, at that lunch, said, "Well, congratulations on
Beth
getting
is
cast."
tricky.
Yes, she is.
Yes,
Anytime
she
there's
is.
food, and she's paying for it, there's something coming up.
There you
And
go.
she
Okay,
she said, "Congratulations on getting Scrooge. What are you going to do after that?" And I said, "Well, Beth, I'm currently the Wizard and Wizard of Oz, and then I'll be Scrooge in the Christmas Carol. I don't have any plans to do anything after we close in December." And she
sure.
paused and looked at me and said, "Well, would you consider directing Exit Laughing?" And I knew nothing about the show. I didn't see the show when it first premiered
Hmm.
several years ago here at the Landers. And I said, "Well, how many in the cast?" And she said, "5." And I said, "How many sets?" She said, "One interior set." I said, "How many costumes?" She said, "One costume for each character." And I said, "Well, let me read it." So I didn't know anything about it. Well, after
Right.
after I read it, I absolutely fell in love with the script and the themes and the lessons that it teaches us about life. And so I said, "Yes, I will direct this show," and have been thrilled with that decision ever since.
It's I did a little research on the history of this show. It ran on Broadway until about 2009, and
Hmm.
it won a Tony. So it's
Wonderful.
it's a Tony Award winning show. But the fact that it's five people and it's comedy, not entirely comedy. I know there's parts
Mm-mm.
of this that make you cry, and there's
Right?
parts that'll make you laugh. But
Exactly.
is there anything harder than directing comedy? Because you talk to any comedians and they'll tell you until you got the room, it can be pretty frightening up there.
Right, exactly. Well, I tell you what, it is directing a comedy is all about the timing. And it is also all about the placement of the joke and the pause so the
Hmm.
audience has time to get the joke and express their laughter before we go on. And one thing we have been talking about in rehearsals is not talking over the laughter. And that's something you can't rehearse because
Hmm.
every audience will react to every line differently for every time you perform. You can't always suppose, oh, this will always get a laugh. And that's one of the things we started at the very beginning. We are not playing this for the laughs. We're playing this for the honesty and the truth that comes out in the
Ah.
characters of the three women who have been friends for 30 years. And on the eve of their friend's visitation and cremation, they get
Hmm.
together for one final bridge night. And so it's a bittersweet reunion, but it is filled with absolute slap your thigh, throw back your head laughter. It is really a funny show.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not a spring chicken, and we've got some groups that we've been part of as my wife and I for many years. 35,
Right.
40 years. One longer than that. I mean, we all went to
Mm-hmm.
college together, and uh, I can't think of anything worse than losing someone in that group,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
that's what this play's all about.
It is. It is. It is. It is a not necessarily a reunion, but it is a celebration of
Hmm.
Mary, is the woman who has passed away and been cremated, because Mary is actually present at the Bridge Club meeting because Millie decided Mary needed to be with them and not stuck in an urn in the funeral home. And Millie goes to the funeral home and breaks in and steals Mary's ashes and brings them to Connie's house.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
she does.
We
Yes,
we
she
got to
does.
be careful telling the whole story here, but
Exactly. Well, that is
well,
just
that's a
one.
good start.
Yes. Well, and unbeknownst to the ladies at the time that Mary appears in Connie's handbag,
Hmm.
Mary has plans because she knew of her demise in advance. She apparently had been ill for some time, and she knew that on that bridge night, she was in charge of refreshments. And so she has refreshments delivered from a local bakery where she always got the refreshments. And then
Hmm.
she also had plans to leave a legacy to these three women, her dear friends, that will change their lives forever. And the delivery of that legacy comes in the hands of a college boy slash policeman slash stripper. And so
Okay.
it is one comedy event on top of another when you watch this show.
Are the actors, the characters that we're going to see, are these folks that we're going to think of when we think of some of the other recent
Yes,
plays?
yes. Connie is played by Leanne DePriest, and she most recently appeared in Steel Magnolias in
Hmm.
just the last season or two. Melissa Morgan is another retired school teacher, and she hasn't been with us for 15 years. But when she
Wow.
was on performing at the Landers, she was in Huck Finn that Beth directed, and then she was also in Our Town, directed by George Cron. And
Hmm.
then Michelle Scott is our third lady, and she just appeared with me in A Christmas Carol. She was the ghost of Christmas Future. And then
Ah, okay.
Ellie Lemire is the college daughter. She's Connie's daughter, Rachel Ann. And Ellie Lemire was also in Steel Magnolias. But we have a newbie. Cale Harper is the young man who comes with his boombox and his stripper costume. And he
Right.
is a brand new performer with Springfield Little Theatre, although he does improv with the Mystery Hour. And he's a delightful young man, and he does an excellent job.
Oh, that sounds like a great group. I can't wait to see this performance. Mark, I liken your job as a director a little bit like a college football or basketball coach.
Right.
If
Absolutely.
there's a history there to that program, everybody there, you want to bring it forward if you can to
Right.
do as well as or better than the last group. The Landers Theater, Springfield Little Theater, has been blessed with incredible performances. I mean, I lived in New York City for 7 years, went to on Broadway, went to off Broadway, and I got to tell you, even some of the Broadway shows haven't been as good as some of the things that
Right.
I've seen at Springfield's Little Theater.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are so fortunate to have a wonderful executive staff that runs the theater. And then we have a fantastic artistic staff of sound and lighting designers and costumers and all of those people behind the scenes that make
Mhm.
the work of the director so incredibly enjoyable and easy. I meet with the set designers and the costume designers way before even auditions, and we talk about what we want the set to look like and what we want the costumes to look like. And so before I ever even know who's going to be in the show, I
Mhm.
know basically what the set and costumes are going to be. And then we hold auditions, and they offer an audition workshop a week before the auditions. And for those people who kind of want the inside track of reading the script first and that kind of thing, can do the
Mhm.
audition workshop. And then we have 2 nights of open auditions and then callbacks, and then we cast the show. And then that is a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and the very following Sunday evening, we have a cast meeting where they get their cast photos and their measurements and their scripts, and they learn all the ins and outs of the rehearsal schedule and the process, and away we go. And then from that
Mar-
point on, we are supported as a director in the production every step of the way.
when you're handed a script of something that either you haven't seen, in this case you hadn't seen this before, right?
No.
Before you get the script, is there a tendency to want to look and see if there's something that's in video somewhere or in film,
Well,
to maybe get a sense of what somebody else had seen? Because I know directors, again, like coaches or even symphony conductors,
mhm,
there's a certain, you can have the notes, everybody can play the notes, but you always
mhm,
want to put your mark on it, right? You want it
absolutely, yes.
to have your flavor. But do you do that?
Mhm.
Do you look at
Well,
something from before?
not in the beginning. No, I
Okay.
I don't I don't look up anything until after auditions, because I don't want to
Ah.
have a preconceived notion of this is how the role should be played. I want the
Hmm.
actors in the audition process, and I tell them this when they audition, especially in callbacks. I'm not going to decide who's in this show. You're going to decide for me. And if you really want to be Connie or Millie or Leona, then you need to bring it when you're up there on stage. Don't be afraid to
Hmm.
try something. It does, because at this point there is no right or wrong in these characters. You will decide for me that you're the best part for the show. And then I will admit, I did look at, on YouTube, there's a video highlight reel of the original production here at the Landers, and I did look at it to kind of get an idea what their set might
Hmm.
have looked like, and a couple of the technical issues, but I really didn't look at it in terms of characterization or acting, because I wanted to bring a fresh take on this.
Sure.
And that's one of the things about this. If someone did see the original production, I guess it's been 11 or 13 years ago, we're not
Hmm.
recreating the original production. We're bringing a fresh take, a new set, different costumes, a fresh take on the script, and it is just been a joy to work with.
Oh, that's fascinating. Are there musical parts in this show, or is it all spoken word?
It is all spoken word, but there is music because the stripper needs musical accompaniment to do his act. Yes,
But I did see that on the Little Theater website, this is a PG-13,
it
so
is. It is. It is.
we don't want to scare anybody away
No,
from
no.
bringing young people.
Right. There is some language in the show, but it is nothing you
Mhm.
have not heard at Walmart.
Sure,
The stripper is in stripper attire, but he's probably wearing more clothes than you will have seen at the beach. And
sure.
because it's not about his stripping necessarily, it's about why he's doing the stripping, because Mary has sent him on a very specific mission that he's supposed to do this first before he delivers her final legacy to these three ladies.
Excellent. We're going to talk about casting when we come back. We'll be back in a moment with more on Around the Ozark Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott Meier, back in just a minute.
Hey, everybody, it's Ethan and Sarah Forhetz from your favorite podcast, Around the Ozarks in 5. I'm sure you've been wondering, how can I get even more amazing stories, events, and witty banter to start my day?
Well, look no further. Here we are. Sign up for our daily newsletter. You'll have what's going on around the Ozarks right at your fingertips each weekday morning.
Yeah, just go to aroundtheozarks.com, click on the newsletter tab to sign up.
Thanks for listening to Around the Ozarks in 5. We hope to see you in your inbox soon.
Welcome back to the second half of today's Around the Ozarks Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott Meier. With me is Mark Gideon, the director of Exit Laughing, which is the newest play that you'll find at Springfield's Little Theatre, at the Landers Theatre. Why does it have two names? I've not lived here my whole life. I've lived here for a decade. But I'm always confused about the Landers Theatre as the theater itself, right?
Right.
And Springfield Little Theatre is actually, a guest, if you will, or a renter at the Landers Theatre?
No, we own the building. The
Okay.
Landers Theatre is a historic landmark, and then the Springfield Little Theatre, years and years and years ago, bought the building, and it is the home of Springfield Little Theatre. And because we do at times bring in other guest artists or other kinds of events at the Landers, they wanted to keep those two things separate. Because the Landers is a beautifully restored historic theater. If people have not been in, you can sit in the auditorium before the show goes up and just look around at all of the gilt and carvings and carpeting. I mean, it's a beautiful setting to begin with. And then the
really
performances on the stage are absolutely, it's a great space to work in. There are wonderful dressing rooms downstairs. It's a very nice facility, both for the audience as well as the actors.
Now, Mark, since you've directed some other programs at Springfield's Little Theatre, but you've acted in a number of them too. So you've had a chance to not only audition different actors, but work with them.
Yeah,
when you get into the role of casting, which is a big job in its own right, do you have some people in mind that you'd like to see in certain characters, or do you have to wipe your mind clean and see everybody through the perspective of, I don't even know these people?
Right. Well, I tell you what, I do, if I see someone, like if I'm selling concessions at a play, or I see someone in the lobby after I've left the stage at a Christmas Carol that I think might be a possibility for a show that I'm going to be directing, I will say, you need to read the script of the next production, for example, Exit Laughing. I think, you might be interested in being in that. And then that's all I say to them, because I don't precast, certainly. And because I never know, one, their availability, and two, what they'll bring to audition. Someone that I think would be absolutely tremendously wonderful could get up and read, and I think, well, maybe I was wrong, or because so much of casting is the combination of the actors and the chemistry. That's why Ellie Lemire and Cale Harper got the role of the college boy and college girl, because there is some romantic interest between the two of them. But they had wonderful chemistry in auditions, and in fact, they made the decision for me. I called them back, and there were other young couples that I called back. But when those two read together, I thought, well, there they are. Those are the two that I'm going to use. And that was very, very nice. And that chemistry has only increased and deepened since we've been in rehearsal. And I think the audience will be very touched by their stories.
When you open a casting call, and in this case, the casting call for Exit Laughing, how many people came?
We had 26 people audition for 5 parts. Wow. And I called back, I believe, 14 or 15 of them. And so I could have had 3 separate casts of the show. And everybody who auditioned, and especially everybody who was called back, did a wonderful job. And so in fact, if I look back in my director's notes, which I keep top secret, I had 3 different casts. I could cast this way, or I could cast this way, or I could cast this way, because sometimes there have been times when you've posted a cast list and someone has said, oh, I didn't realize the dates and I can't, so they can't do the show. So I always have to have a backup. And so I was very fortunate that I had that level of 3 different groups that I could have gone with, but I'm very, very pleased with the 5 people that I've selected.
Now, prior to our having the conversation on the Spotlight, I had read, and then we had discussed, this is a perfect time to be able to bring a group of friends and go see a play at Springfield's Little Theatre. You said it's exactly what you want to do. Bring some of your besties and sit and have a good time.
You absolutely. You want to gather your friends whether they've been longtime friends or just recent friends, but you want together people that mean something to you in your life. And if
Hmm.
you all sit there and see this show together, you will be so glad you did. There are life lessons in this. There will be parts where you'll be slapping your knee and throwing your head back laughing. And there'll be parts when you're probably reaching for a Kleenex, because there are some
Sure.
moments in this show where something happens or something is read that absolutely stops us for a minute, and we have to, absorb that moment of the information we have learned. And that was one of the things that we worked on, is the timing of the show,
Hmm.
because it will run an hour and 45 minutes, and then with 15-minute intermission, we're looking at a 2-hour evening. So 7:30, 9:30, 2 to
Hmm.
4 on a matinee. And the comic timing, the show is fairly fast paced. But there are moments in the show, especially in the second act, where we learn about what Mary's final wishes are and how they're going to impact the three ladies and the college boy.
Hmm.
That it just stops for a moment. You kind of have to
Now, the
swallow a little
history,
bit.
yeah, well, the history on Exit Laughing is once people have started to see the show, word gets out, and it's a really tough ticket to get.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I will tell you, tickets are selling very well. We keep tabs through the online ticketing website with the
Hmm.
Springfield Little Theater, and we can see how many seats are available. And I will tell you, at the beginning of this week, I looked at all of the different performances, and I thought, ooh, we don't have anybody coming to see this show. And then last night, my props master, because he was
Yeah.
out in the audience taking notes with me, he was poking around looking at the website, and he showed me the first weekend, and also into the second weekend, and the seats are really selling. I mean, there are
Yeah.
a limited number of seats. So if someone's thinking about it, our suggestion is they call and make their reservation. If they're bringing a group, especially,
Right.
they can call and reserve, say, 10 tickets. That's the minimum to get the group rate. And then they
Sure.
gather their people, and then they can pay for it closer to the time of the performance. Or if they're just bringing themselves and a friend or husband or wife, they go ahead and make the reservations, because we only give 9 performances and we only perform 2 weekends. This isn't like a musical where we perform for 3 weekends and you have plenty of time. You really don't. You've got 9 performances beginning March the 14th, and we close on March the 23rd, and that is it.
In total. My guest today on Around the Ozark Spotlight is Mark Gideon. Mark, kind enough to join me. He's the director of Exit Laughing, which is about to have its first performance this next weekend.
Yes.
And very excited about that. Now, as a director and an actor, tell me a little bit about what goes on in your mind when you're not directing, but trying to get a role, having been
Mhm.
a director and I'm thinking in your mind, thinking I'm the perfect person for this cast.
Well, whenever I approach an audition, depending upon
Hmm.
the demands of the role, depends on how far out I depends on how far out I start preparing, and actually how badly I want the role. And I knew from the moment that A Christmas Carol was announced in the season that I wanted to be Scrooge. I was
Hmm.
Scrooge. I knew I was Scrooge. I knew what I could bring to the role. But I also knew that in preparation for the vocal audition, where you had to sing, and then for the cold reading of the lines, that I needed to get to work. So I started 6 weeks out from the audition date. And I got with
Wow.
a retired teacher who was a music teacher out at Nixa High School, where I taught for 1 year years ago. And
Sure.
Peggy and I worked together at her house on my audition song, and she arranged the song specifically for me. And she even actually rewrote some of the notes for me. And then she came to the audition and played for me. And the audition song, my vocal audition, went exactly as I had planned. It was just as
Hmm.
if I was giving a performance. And it was, I wanted to plant in the director's minds, here is your Scrooge. And then I got called back. And then during the cold reading, I knew exactly how I wanted to interpret the character. And I was hoping that's what the directors would want. And obviously it did, because I got cast. Now, I
Right.
did have an understudy, Billy
Uh huh.
Gowers, who is a fabulous singer and a fabulous performer. And he and I had a great time. And it was wonderful that he and I could share the role of Scrooge, because it was very demanding. And we sometimes either he was sick or I was sick during the run, and so we covered for each other, and it turned out just fine.
No, that's great. So in this cast, do you have understudies as well?
We do not, and so I have told them from the first cast meeting,
You're flying without a net.
you are. You stay well. You
Wow.
take care of yourself. You get your rest, especially you two young college people. Be careful because there is no understudy for the show.
Yeah.
And we have a cat in the show. Mary, when she passed,
Yeah.
had a cat named Butterbutt. And so Butterbutt appears in one scene of the show at the beginning of the story, but his litter box figures very prominently in the end of the story as we close out the play.
Now, does Butterbutt have a understudy, or is we got to keep Butterbutt
Actually, we
healthy
have
as
Butterbutt.
well?
We have Butterbutt 1 and 2. Our
Oh.
original Butterbutt is named Gabriel. He is a foster cat through Watching Over Whiskers, and he is available for adoption. And he's a chunky little orange tabby, very, very sweet. And the thing about Gabriel that is very touching and wonderful, Gabriel is actually blind. He can see shapes and light and dark, but he can only perceive the world through smell and through hearing. And he's a very sweet cat, and he is only in Rachel Ann's, the college daughter's, arms for one scene, and then we don't see him again. But we also have Iris, who is a gray tabby, very sweet, a younger cat, and she actually is a pet of one of our crew members. And so we have that cat as a stand-in just in case Gabriel can't perform one night or it's too frightening for him to be on stage. So far, he's been fine, but I always like having a plan B. Do I have a plan B for the 5 human actors? I do not. So we're going to keep them very, very well.
Mark, what goes through your mind the night of the practice night before the opening night?
Well, one of my best pieces of advice that I received when I was at Evangel College was from my college theater professor, Dr. Nona Daly. And she said, you will know when the play needs to be turned over to the cast. You will know when it is time to lay it at their feet and this is their show. Because in reality, once the curtain goes up on opening night, you cannot do anything about anything that might happen on stage. If they go up on a line, if they miss a cue, if there's a technical error, there's nothing you can do. You cannot run from the back of the theater and jump on stage and fix it. They have to figure it out. And I will tell you, this cast is really getting to that level. We'll have our first technical rehearsal on Sunday evening, and then they'll have dress rehearsals on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I think probably by end of rehearsal on Tuesday, that Wednesday, my job will really be done because they will have taken the show into their own hands. And that's the way it should be. A good director does all of his work up front. And then once he gets them to opening night, he just steps back into the wings and smiles and thinks they're doing a great job. And I fully believe that's exactly what I'll be thinking.
There really are a lot of parallels with the sports world. I
There
mean,
are.
you can't the coach can't go out and play the game.
Nope.
The kids have to do it, and you really got to lay the groundwork for them to figure that out when they're out there.
Exactly. Well, and play rehearsal is just like football practice. You get together, you talk about your strategy, what you're trying to achieve, and then you work on that play for that evening, and working on the comic timing or pushing the tempo or picking up cues and memorizing your lines and all that kind of thing. And there is so much that goes into a play. And if it seems effortless to the audience, that they are never taken out of that illusion of reality, that what is happening on stage is really happening. If it seems effortless to them and they thoroughly enjoy it, then you know they don't realize all the work that goes into getting that moment exactly right. So they can just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
I would guess that first laugh will sound like the first 3-point shot.
Yes, I will tell you, I will be standing at the back of the house in the lobby where I can see and hear. And when I hear that first laughter, I'll think, phew, okay, we have a good show. And then, because I really don't watch too much of the show after it opens. I certainly don't take notes and talk to the actors after we open a show. But I do step in to see and hear how the audience is reacting. And I'm with the Guild of Springfield Little Theatre, and we'll be selling concessions for every performance. And I plan to be helping with concessions because I want to hear the audience's reaction at intermission and to see just exactly if they are enjoying the show and what they think and that kind of thing. And there's nothing more empowering as a director for something that you worked on for so long, see it come to fruition and see the audience enjoy it and see the actors enjoy what they're doing because they are very confident that they have rehearsed everything to the final degree.
Mark, I want to thank you today for being my guest on Around the Ozark Spotlight. Good luck to you in the run
Thank
of
you so
Exit
much.
Laughing. I want to thank my producers, Taylor Dempster and Jay Stevens, as well as all of you for joining us today. If you happen to miss all or part of the program, you can find ATO Spotlight on the AroundTheOzarks.com website, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or X. And our app is always found in the ATO Apple App Store or the Android App Store. I'm Scott Meier. Remember, every day is a gift. Live life to the fullest. Have a great day.